Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. I'm Mr. Jack and I'm back with some more vibes for all you. And we're going to do something here called Scary Saturday and Ting. And here's what we're going to look at tonight: 10 creepy creatures from Scandinavian folklore. Let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer and see what these creepy creatures from Scandinavian folklore is.
How you doing? I'm Callan and this is Slapped Ham. Today we're talking about a little bit of mythology. From a giant wolf to the mysterious spirit of the Black Death. We count 10 creepy creatures from Scandinavian folklore. But before we get into it, remember to hit that subscribe button for more awesome creepy content just like this. During early Swedish history, it wasn't uncommon for unwanted infants to be put to death by their parents. This may sound brutal and heartless, but for many parents it was a matter of not being able to afford another mouth to feed. Other infants found their way into early graves because they were conceived out of wedlock, or they were the result of adultery, both circumstances being extremely taboo in Swedish culture. The mothers of these unwanted children would often leave their babies deep in the forest where they wouldn't be found. Because they weren't baptized, it was thought that these children wandered the forests, streams and hollows where they were left, waiting for unwary travellers to pass by. When they encountered these travellers, mylings would jump on the victim's back, wailing and crying to such an extent that it would drive the victim insane. It also wasn't uncommon for mylings to drive their victims into the nearest burial ground. Once there, the myling would demand that their victim dig a grave and then give them a proper burial, something they hadn't received while living.
Whoa,
If the
whoa.
victim was unsuccessful in providing an appropriate resting place, the myling would attack the individual, killing them in a blind fury. The dokalfar, or dark elves of Norse mythology, are considered to be some of the most frightening creatures of Scandinavian folklore. Described as having bright red glowing eyes, pale white skin and wearing steel grey armour, they were first mentioned by Snorri Sturluson in his 12th century collection of Norse poetry called the Edda. It's believed that dokalfar live in caves and other underground dwellings, as well as deep in forests where the sunlight rarely reaches the ground. They were also known to reside in forgotten locations that were rumoured to be haunted or cursed. The dokalfar have been blamed for a wide variety of human ailments and calamities. By the 17th century, when Christianity took a firm hold in the area, dark elves were considered to be at fault for everything, from diseased livestock to lightning strikes. In particular, the dokalfar were thought to bring about sudden paralysis in people, an affliction that came to be known as elf stroke. Even bad dreams were blamed on the dokalfar. It was thought that when a person was having a bad dream, a dark elf was sitting on their chest, causing the bad dream to occur.
I have bad dreams all the time.
Also known as the malice striker, Nidhogg is a terrible serpentine creature that rests beneath the world tree, Yggdrasil, chewing at its roots. As a devourer, Nidhogg's sole intention is the destruction of the tree that contains and holds the 9 worlds of the universe. With the destruction of the tree, the whole of the universe would fall back into chaos. Due to his desire for chaos, Nidhogg played a prominent role in Ragnarok, the doom of the gods. In the Völuspá, a prominent poem in the poetic Edda, Nidhogg arises from beneath Yggdrasil to lend his aid during Ragnarok, resulting in the downfall of the gods that represents order within chaos. Nidhogg also rules over Nastrond, a portion of the underworld also known as the Shore of the Corpses. This is where adulterers, murderers, liars and other violent or deceitful criminals go after they've died, and where Nidhogg awaits to feed on their corpses. His favourite corpses are those of fallen warriors who, because of their acts of cowardice or oath-breaking, are denied entry into Valhalla, the heavenly realm where brave warriors go after falling in battle. Scandinavia was devastated by the plague, with Norway losing around half of its population and Denmark losing approximately a third. People were so distraught, never knowing where the plague would strike next, that they soon began to apply sentient characteristics to the disease, and Pesta was born.
Explainable.
Pesta is the personification of the Black Death. She assumed the form of a ravaged, frightening old woman dressed in black rags and carrying a rake and a broom. Villagers believed that Pesta journeyed from house to house, spreading the Black Death. If she was spotted carrying her broom, it meant that everyone in the house would be swept away by the plague and all in the household would die. If she was ever seen carrying her rake, it meant that some would slip through death's fingers and survive. One story tells of a ferryman who, upon arriving to pick up his fare, found that it was Pesta whom he'd be carrying across the river. Realising that his fate resided in her hands, the ferryman asked her to spare him from the plague. Pesta replied that she would not, but she told him that because of his kindness she would make sure that he had a painless death. That night,
Well,
the
that's
ferryman
some
went
kind of
home into his
a.
bed, where he fell into a deep sleep that he never awoke from.
That's kind of relief.
The draugr are
You won't die, but
extraordinarily
not
strong
painfully.
undead creatures who retain at least some of their intellect even after they've died. They reside in or near their burial sites, often guarding the burial goods left for them by their loved ones. In Norse mythology, it's thought that the creation of a draugr can occur due to a curse being placed on an individual, or because the person has a very strong will and just refuses to die. The draugr are known for their violence and exist to torment the living, particularly those that may have wronged the draugr while they were living. The draugr will even appear to their enemies' livestock, taking on a rotting appearance before chasing the animals until they've literally been run to death. If an undead creature of frightening appearance and size isn't enough, the draugr are also thought to have uncanny magical abilities. They can shapeshift into other forms such as a bull or a horse, but the forms that they take are all damaged in some way, usually with a missing or broken limb or appendages. One of their favourite forms is that of a cat. Once they've assumed this appearance,
Man,
they make their
I
way to
hate
their
cats.
chosen
Well,
victim.
I don't
When
hate
this
them, but
individual has
I
gone
don't
to
like
bed
them.
and fallen asleep, the draugr will sit on their chest, increasing their weight until their victim can no longer breathe, resulting in their death. Even though the draugr may cheat death, animating their bodies in order to terrorise the living, it's only temporary. Their bodies continue to decay even as the draugr animate them, until eventually the body becomes too damaged and can no longer be utilised. At this point, the draugr dies again, this time permanently. The Norse took careful precautions to prevent dead loved ones from rising as draugr. A door was created in the outside wall closest to where a person died, so that the corpse wouldn't have to be carried through the front door. The Norse thought that if a person was carried out the front door, they would remember how to enter the home and terrorise those within it. Some families even went so far as to drive nails into the feet of the departed to keep them from rising again. Just like many other cultures in the world, the Scandinavians have their own explanation for nightmares and sleep paralysis, and they call it the nutmara. There are several tales about how these creatures came into existence. One legend tells of a group of peasant women who came together to perform a ritual to alleviate the pain of childbirth. Unfortunately, the ritual had an unfortunate effect. The women found themselves transforming into monstrous werewolves every night, the curse to be carried forth indefinitely by their daughters and their future female generations. Others believe that nutmara are actually the souls of hyperactive, restless female children. When they should be sleeping, the souls of the
Beware of those evil women. They'll hurt you now. Seems like every culture has got that evil woman type of mythology in there.
These children travel by night to disturb the restful sleep of those around them. The nutmara are typically described as being wraith-thin with pale skin and long black hair and nails. They can transform into sand, making it easy for them to slip through the tiniest crack in a wall or door and straddle the chest of their unwary victims so they can plague them with nightmares. Nutmara are also attributed with properties similar to the banshee. It's thought that their appearance is an omen of death, and if a mara leaves a grimy poppet in the living space of a family, someone in the household will soon be affected by tuberculosis. Just for mischief, a mara will tangle your hair in such knots that
Explains
they have to come out.
tuberculosis.
The nutmara are also fond of frightening horses.
To them,
leaving it
at
to be
least.
found by their owners spooked and worn. There is a way to keep the nutmara from plaguing your.
You know, I think now with the virus going on, we are creating our own myths, but it's sort of based on technology itself, or even in some of these cases, I'm not sure how it was back then, but with science, they'll inject something into you, you know what I mean, making you into a zombie or a lizard person or something like that. They were creating their own myths. I wonder if years from now there's going to be tales of somebody who was injected with the vaccine being some kind of devil person or something. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I don't believe in all that. But I could see that. I could see human beings creating stories like that, telling stories of all these horrible things that happened to people who took it. Or vice versa, the horrible things that happened to people who didn't take it. There's going to be stories about that. You know what I mean? It will be an urban legend. Remember the time that the guy took the vaccine and this happened to him? He grew two heads out of his body, or somebody else came out of him and walked the earth, terrorizing the population. It sort of switched around a little bit from then, because back then they didn't have the electricity and all of that. So to explain things, they come up with these things. So to explain people's reasons for not doing their due diligence to take care of this pandemic, they'll come up with these stories. And so years from now, I wonder what those stories are going to be like.
Restful sleep. The Mara normally approaches a sleeper from the front of the bed. Placing your shoes or nailing a horseshoe at the front of the bed will distract her and dissuade her from disturbing a restful night's
I don't think they're
sleep.
going to go as far as placing a horseshoe in under the
The
bed.
Nokken, also known as Nikjen or Nik, is a frightening creature that is found lurking in areas where there's fresh water, usually deep lakes and ponds. He especially loves areas where there are lily pads, whose lovely flowers attract the unsuspecting. Because he's a shapeshifter, the Nokken can assume whatever form he thinks will lure his potential victims. He's been known to assume the guise of a handsome man to trick women into the water, where he can then drown them. The
Beware of
same
us
goes
good
for
looking
men,
men.
with the Nokken playing the role of the damsel helpless in the water to entice men in, where he can also drown them. Even children aren't beyond Nokken's reach. He'll assume the form of an attractive white horse, letting a youngster climb onto his back, and then quickly leaping into the closest body of water in order to drown the unsuspecting child. The Nokken is also an excellent violinist. His favourite time to play is late in the evening, when his alluring tunes draw the unwary to the lake or pond where he's hidden. The Nokken takes their souls as his forever. The true appearance of the Nokken is anything but attractive, however. He has the waxy skin of a drowned corpse and is draped in moss and waterlogged debris. He has a mouth filled with sharp, jagged teeth and large, burning yellow eyes that can sometimes be seen resting just above the waterline. Those who have the misfortune of encountering him in his true form are driven to instant insanity, with the Nokken in control of the hapless soul. Fortunately, there are a couple of ways to gain protection from this monster. One method involves casting an iron or steel needle into the body of water where the Nokken resides, speaking its name as you do. This at least will stop the Nokken from causing harm, but if performed with true conviction, it can actually kill the beast. If the Nokken has already attacked and you can produce an iron or steel cross, the Nokken will be forced to release you, especially if you're able to keep enough wits about you to call on the Virgin Mary in the process. There's even an old riddle of protection meant to ward off the Nokken. It roughly translates as, "Nick, nick, needle in the water, the Virgin Mary threw steel in the water. You are sinking, I float."
Simplistic.
Wolves play a prominent role in Norse folklore, and Fenrir is the grandest, most frightening wolf of all. He is the child of Loki, the god of mischief and misrule, and Angrboda, the giantess whose name means the one who brings grief. He's enormous in size, with jaws that reach both the sky and earth when he howls. His siblings are Hel, the queen of the underworld, and the Midgard serpent Jormungandr. It was prophesied that Fenrir would play a major role in Ragnarok. It would be the massive wolf that would devour Odin, the father of all. Even as a young adult, Fenrir was a terrifying force. He went on killing rampages, devouring any and all that were in his path. Knowing the danger that Fenrir presented, Odin wanted ultimately to slay him, but in the sacred land of Asgard, killing was forbidden. Attempts were made instead to capture and chain Fenrir. 2 initial attempts were made using the magical chains Lyding and Dromi, but both attempts failed and Fenrir was still on the loose and wreaking havoc. The gods decided to try again, and the gold chain Gleipnir was created using 6 impossible items. A woman's beard, a fish's breath, a bird's spit, a bear's nerves, a mountain's roots, and a cat's footfall. Odin
There
and his
goes the cat
cohorts lured
again.
Fenrir to the island of Lingvir and challenged him to attempt to break Gleipnir. Fenrir accepted the challenge, but only if one of the gods would display their bravery by placing their hand on Fenrir's mouth. The god Tyr, a warrior god, accepted the challenge, and soon Fenrir found himself bound by an unbreakable chain and was stashed away in a cave on the island. Eventually, Fenrir will free himself with the arrival of Ragnarok to devour Odin as prophesied. Unfortunately for Fenrir, Odin's son Vidar won't appreciate this unkind treatment of his father. He will seek the ultimate revenge by slaying Fenrir. The huldra are seductive creatures that are found in Scandinavian forests. They are stunningly beautiful women, but they also have a cow's or fox's tail and their back is gnarled and hollowed like an old tree. They are very protective of the land they inhabit and can become violent if they or their land are mistreated. A favourite pastime of the huldra is luring unsuspecting men back to their den where they
Sounds like the
kept as
Ladja Bliss.
slaves. Sometimes, instead of enslaving a man, the huldra will drain him of his life force, leaving an empty shell behind. Occasionally, the huldra will like to toy with humans. After capture, they will release the individual, but they place a terrible curse upon him, so that the man is plagued
That
with
really
constant
sounds like the Ladja
temptation
Bliss.
to return to the one who captured him. In other stories, the behaviour of the huldra is dependent upon the treatment they receive from human hands. If they are treated kindly, the huldra may consent to aid the human with their magic, providing solutions to whatever problems may be occurring in the individual's life. The huldra may go so far as to marry a man.
See, I talked about Elijah Bliss before, but Elijah Bliss is a sort of folktale character. And on the island, she wears a long white dress. Uh, and the story that I had of her as a kid, she was beautiful. She would lure men in. They'd either not be heard from again, or they come back bazodi, or like not knowing themselves. And she's purported to have one human leg and one goat leg. So this is kind of similar to it.
And if she is treated well. When this happens, the huldra loses her tail and will actually become human herself, while still retaining her magical abilities. The huldra can be very unpredictable in their nature, however. While they might be kind if they're treated well, their mood can turn on a whim, making them quite dangerous. If they are mistreated by their husbands, the huldra will punish the man, stealing his sight, his hearing, or even his wits. It's also thought that they'll occasionally steal human children, replacing them with their own misshapen infants. Before we get to that number 1 spot and take a look at Scandinavia's version of a vampire, remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on channel notifications. That way you'll be completely up to date with all our latest content. The genganger are terrifying spirits who are trapped on Earth because they may have left things in a poor state when they died. Often these spirits are the victims of a senseless crime such as a rape or murder, or they themselves could have been the killer. Suicide victims and those who had an abusive family can also return as a genganger. They're always hateful and they'll go out of their way to harm the loved ones they left behind, even if they had been fond of them in life. These ghosts aren't your typical spirits, they can actually cause physical harm. The genganger are well known for spreading disease. They pinch their victim's flesh and the area that was damaged will bruise as an infection takes hold. Eventually the tissue will become necrotic and the infection will make its way to the victim's heart, killing them. Most often the genganger attack their victims while they're sleeping, so they're defenseless against the attack. The genganger are quite similar to vampires in their behaviour. They prefer to travel by night and they're repelled by holy objects such as crosses. They're highly intelligent and can plan their attacks in a cunning manner. Fortunately, there are measures that can be taken to ward off genganger. Unlike other ghosts, the genganger are corporeal in nature, so closing and locking doors and windows can go a long way in deterring these angry spirits. Wearing a cross or other holy objects can also protect the wearer from an attack. Folklore states that any shovels used to prepare the grave of an individual who might become a genganger should be left at the grave, and that the coffin should be carried around the church 3 times before burial.
Wow.
Finally, inscriptions should be carved on the lid of the coffin, beseeching the spirit of the deceased to rest peacefully, leaving family and friends unscathed. Well, there's another episode down. Thank you so much for watching.
Wow, interesting. Scary a little bit there, but totally interesting. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. I'm going to try to do this every Saturday, and just a scary thing. It's going to be mythology, but I'm going to do a little bit of ghost thing too, because, I watch YouTube for entertainment too. So, look out for those coming. Hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I do. Link in the description to this video. This channel here does a lot of scary videos and stuff like that, y'all. So go give them some love and thing, you know what I mean? In the meantime, y'all take care of each other, alright? Cool runnings.